Hi, and welcome to Mark's Motivational Podcast for this Thursday. Today, I'm delighted again to be joined by Orlando. On again today, Orlando.
cheers, Mark. No, it's good to be here, mate, and I'm looking forward to this evening's topic.
Yeah,
it's all about time.
Yeah, timeline. It's great. They're great. It's a great aspect of NLP, isn't it? Timelines.
Good fun.
Yeah, it's great. And before we go ahead, do you want to talk about you've got a new website coming on board, and you've also got a number of courses that's going to happen in the future. Would you like to tell the listeners about that, please?
Well, absolutely. Well, a sneak preview, as it were. There is a new website coming out, and we'll have a full range of our courses available, from literally an introduction to NLP, introductions to hypnosis, through to short courses with specific topics within those two NLP and hypnosis frameworks, and right through to a full practitioner of NLP that is a licensed practitioner with the Society of NLP, a very successful online course, NLP Hypnosis Fusion, utilizing NLP and hypnosis skills within a coaching or therapy session. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot more to come in a few weeks' time, but very much looking forward to it, mate.
Yeah, great. Because when a new website comes on board, just share it with me. I can put it on the show notes for people to visit it as well. So
absolutely,
starting to do that. So we'll probably start off about the subject of timelines. Can you tell me, tell the listeners what timelines are for you, Orlando?
Well, yeah, I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
Okay, what is a timeline? Well, the name timeline has a purpose within neurolinguistic programming, and it's we'll get into a bit more of that. But to me, the easiest description is that a timeline is an internal representation of this thing that we call time. And quite frankly, it doesn't exist, but it's very real for each and every one of us. So no matter what it is that's said, when we use language to describe something to another person, and in this case, timelines, when I ask someone, where is your timeline, or what is the timeline, the mere fact that we can answer that question, outside of I don't know, of course, means that we're representing what a line could be if time were involved with that line. Yeah. Now, for me, the concept of timelines themselves are literally being able to, with a bit of questioning, develop a visual representation inside our mind of a line that has the future at one end, the past at the other, and somewhere on that line is the present moment. Now, when people describe what that line would be, it's possible to ask, where spatially is it? Is it in front of them? Is it behind them? Is it beside them? Which direct? Does it go this way? Does it go that way? Is it going front to back, left to right? And as you ask questions of the client that are leading in some respects to be able to give an answer, what the client's able to do for themselves is to develop an internal visual representation of this thing that we all call time. Now, as an example, for some people, they represent their timeline, the future's in front of them, the past is behind them. And one of the questions I'll ask them is, well, this line that goes out in front of you, how far does it go spatially? I think it was Einstein, space and time are relative. Yeah. Well, to me, that's very true internally. And if someone mentions that their timeline goes 3 meters in front of them and then fades away, well, to me, that's a very short representation for what I would like to think is a very full life ahead of them. So it might be difficult to plan things. For another person, they may look back at this timeline that's behind them, all figuratively inside the mind, of course, or metaphorically. And it may stretch a long way, but they're unable to see things, or it's very tumultuous, or it's up and down like a roller coaster, is one description I had recently. And when I asked, well, how has your past been? They just sat there and laughed and said, well, it's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster ride. It's had some big ups and it's had some big downs. Well, this is not coincidence as far as I'm concerned. These are just internal visual representations for how we represent literally the thing that we call the past and the thing that we call the future. Now, as you know, the past and the future are not things. You can't go and buy one. There are concepts of what will happen over time in front of us, or through time, or under time. But most people in their everyday language, in fact, all people, in my opinion, they sort time in some kind of linear fashion. And that line might be circular, but there's a starting point and a continuation point for time to be represented. Because it's such common terminology, it's a very easy way to assist a person to create an internal strategy that they can then use for planning, that they can use for finding resources in the past, that they can begin to sort information, whether it's future, past, or present-based information. They can choose where it's appropriate to have that, and they can start sorting things out. And as I just say, sorting things out with my hands going left to right. Yeah. A lot of people do sort time either off to their left or right, past or future. And they literally are able to mark on that line where things are going to happen in the future. Well, that's a wonderful tool for planning. Mm-hmm. Being able to see the present moment and see the future off to your left or right hand side. Yeah. And spatially along that line, be able to put different events. Yeah. Well, it's a very easy way to sort things out. It's no different to using a calendar. It's just putting it on a line.
It'd be like goal setting. They could use it kind of in a goal setting thing as well. Couldn't you, Orlando? Like a kind of a.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And look, this is not unusual language as well. I mean, you can walk into a boardroom, and if there's a current project on the table, literally, just in our language, it's on the table. It's not unusual for a manager to ask a team, or vice versa, what's the timeline for this project? Mm-hmm. Now, generally, that question means how long have we got, but it may also indicate that the project may need to be rolled out over several months, which will have marker points along that, or milestones along it, until the eventual goal of completion of the project, or whatever it might be. And not only that, but if the project's been running for longer than this instant now, then the timeline actually goes back in time as well. Well, Roger started this 6 months ago, and he handed it over to Sally, and she efficiently brought it to where we are now. And as a team, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then by this date and next year, we're going to have completed the project. Well, this is being sorted on a line of time. Mm-hmm. Using the concept of visualizing a timeline is simply adding language to something that we already use to describe time, and that is our language, the language of time. We hear it all the time. Before you do that, go and do this first. Mm-hmm. First, we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, and after those two things are completed, then we'll enjoy our vacation. But before all of that, we need to buy the tickets. And for those listeners that are watching on YouTube, you'll see that my hand is marking this time out backwards and forwards. Well, whether it be after this podcast, or maybe some of your listeners, if they've already been introduced to timelines or the concept of a timeline, when you go out into the world, and whether it be in a workplace, socially, anywhere you're interacting with other people, it's not uncommon to see people marking out time with their hands. That's incredibly congruent with the words that are coming out of their mouth. You know, here we are today, and tomorrow we're going to do this, and the next week we'll do this, and before both of those things, we'll make sure the first thing is done. Well, this is the way people use language, but a lot of it's at an unconscious level. They're just moving their hand because it makes sense to them, but they may not have made the conscious connection that their hand is actually demonstrating what their language is. They're literally painting a picture with their hands. And it can be a very, very elegant way of communicating with an individual or with a group of people, so that whether they enjoy taking instructions verbally, or whether they like to see a plan, they're actually getting both in the same presentation. It might not be the same as drawing a picture on a board with lots of colors, but people that enjoy to sort things, or primarily sort things in a visual sense, they're going to get that information. And those listeners that enjoy watching things visually are probably watching this on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Orlando. And could you give any examples of timelines worked for you in your practice? You don't have to give obviously any examples of anybody personal, but like things that you found really help people with using timelines.
Look, I will, and I'm quite happy to make it personal, because I have permission of the client, because I was him. Where the concept of timelines really lit up to me as a brilliant way of working was my own experience, where the terminology meditation had always seemed like a really good idea to me. I should meditate. I should sit down and I should think of everything and nothing. I went on a course for mindfulness. I looked into forget what it was called, but another form of Buddhist meditation. And after about 4 or 5 different forms of meditation, I really just thought, well, maybe I just can't meditate. Maybe I just don't, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I'm not a meditation guy. Yeah. And it was an experience that I had where in the terminology, and not so much used so much in modern times, but describing where you are in relation to your timeline. A person that has a timeline in their, this is again, metaphorically, they're thinking in their imagination when they think of a timeline, if it intersects with their body, that is, it goes through them, then that would be known as being in time. You're actually in the timeline. Mm-hmm. Whereas for some people, having the timeline out in front of you or beside you, but not intersecting the body, that would be known as through time. Now, there is a third option where people are between time. And what that, in a nutshell, means is they're constantly checking in through time, in time, through time, in time. And they're making the comparison of the two different perspectives of how they represent time to decide how they want to act, feel, what decisions that they want to make. Now, I was very much in that bracket when I first came across the concept of timelines. And one of the trainers I was working with spent a little bit of extra time with me. I might not have been the smartest student back in the day, still might not be, but I was tenacious and I did want the result. And I wanted to know what would happen if the present moment was inside me. Now, this would require me being in time in the concept of timelines, my timeline to be going through me. He guided me to move in my imagination, my timeline to my center line. He then guided me to bring it up squarely between my eyes so that the future was directly out in front of me at eye level and the past was actually back and just over my left shoulder, so that it went off on an angle. What that meant is I could figuratively turn around and see my past, therefore learn from it. Wow. Yeah. Now, the point where it got really interesting, in fact, quite frankly, amazing for me, was at that time, the present moment for me was about this far away from my face. I was always just behind the present moment. And with a touch of hypnosis to help the medicine go down, this particular trainer guided me to bring that present moment inside, in between my head, so that my head and entire body would be in the present moment. And when that happened, it took a bit of juggling. And when I was moving around the concept in my mind, it was something new that I hadn't done before in this particular way. When I first did it in this very particular way, And I felt, and I saw a representation in my mind of the present moment and that I was in it. An instant later, I had an overwhelming feeling of what I could only describe as relaxation mixed with bliss.
Wow.
I was absolutely and totally in the moment now. And it was an incredibly relieving feeling for me because it was very unusual for me. Now, I had spent, I don't know how many hours, but probably between training courses and private practice, probably about 60, 70 hours doing meditations of different kinds. And I had never, ever come across a feeling like this. And this whole process took about, from memory, which might be a bit sketchy, he's a pretty good hypnotist, about 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh.
And what was cooler than that, though, was to test what we were doing. He then guided me to move the timeline back to a through time position and then bring it back, and then move it away and bring it back to see if I could bring that feeling back that quickly. And what took 15 minutes, the second time took 15 or 20 seconds. Then the third time it took 10 odd seconds. And now it on average takes 2, maybe 3 seconds at the most, depending on the state that I'm in before I start. If I'm highly excited, I might need to calm down a little before I go into that meditative state. And I still call it meditative with inverted commas with my fingers for the people that are listening, because I don't attest to know what every altered state of consciousness is. What is the Zen state? What is the flow state? Well, I know what all of these things mean to me, but I'm not saying the same as someone else's experience. But what I am saying is I found that to be, number one, incredibly profound, and number two, personally, phenomenally useful for just slowing myself down and taking a break and being present wherever, whenever, no matter what's going on. I can be absolutely in that moment. And it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling that I've gone on to share with, I would be hundreds of clients. I don't know how many, I haven't counted them, but I've used this particular technique with hundreds of clients, even clients that have come to me for something completely unrelated to timelines and meditation. Yeah. It's such a handy skill to be able to go bring yourself into the present moment very, very quickly and experience what is happening in this moment without needing to have everything sorted for the future, everything sorted from the past. The future and past will take care of itself when you are present in the moment. It's simple as that. The world will keep spinning. Yeah. I may not have believed that in my younger years. I had to be chase many things, as a lot of people have learned to be, but that's just a really good way to get worn out.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great, because that sounds brilliant, what you've explained there, Orlando, because it brings me nicely into the next question. For people like practitioners or helpers, whatever you may want to call people in what we do, in what way would you say is really useful to use timelines? In what way are timelines really useful? Because as myself personally, I love, that's one of my favorite things to do, is the timelines, going by it back and making people forget a bad experience and counteracting with a really good experience. So what in your opinion, what way for practitioners?
There's a multitude of uses for playing with timelines, or the concepts of timelines. Two of the primary uses that I personally use timelines for, one is procrastination. A lot of people are very good at procrastinating, and the idea is that it is often presented to me by a client, well, it's just that I can't, or it's just that I can't bring myself to do these things, or they're just not getting done. The mechanism behind this is outside of their awareness. Now, almost every time, not every time, but almost every time when a client explains how they do procrastinating or what's going on for them when they're procrastinating, there are big chunks missing. They just don't, if they don't know what they don't know.
Mm.
At that point, eliciting a timeline and asking about things that maybe, shall we say, more solid or more concrete. For example, looking to the future, what distance is Christmas? Now you can procrastinate about Christmas all you like. The date's still going to come and go. Christmas Day. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that the presents get purchased. Sometimes you can procrastinate until Christmas Eve, like many people are wont to do, and then the shop's closed. So you're shut out of luck. But the actual date isn't going to move. It's still going to be represented wherever it is on the timeline. But then I'll ask them, I might elicit 2 or 3 different situations that are not going to, or very unlikely, get to be moved on from their timeline. I'll then ask them about something that they are planning to do, but they keep putting it off. Procrastination.
Yeah.
And first thing I want to know is there a difference in the way they represent that versus the things that they're certain will happen? I.e., is it on the line, in the line? Is it color black and white? Is an icon or a picture? How is it represented? Are there any obvious difference? Rather than go looking for the fine, infinitely tiny details, I do like to check in what's really obvious first. Now, if there's nothing there that jumps out as a marker that's going to be useful, the next thing I'll have them do is, only in their imagination, of course, imagine stepping forward to tomorrow. And while you do that, notice what happens to all 4 events. Do 3 of them stay where they are and you get closer? The answer is yes. What does the 4th one do? And the number of times people have said to me, oh, well, it kind of drifts off the line and moves with me, or it moves at the same space I do. No matter what happens, it stays just out of reach. It's just further than where I could reach to. This kind of goes with language. I really want to do this, but the idea is just out of reach. Yeah. Well, if it's just out of reach, you're probably not going to get your hands on it.
Yeah.
It seems obvious in language, but the moment people have got a mechanism for how they're representing things that are working well and what the differences are to how they represent in their mind things that aren't getting the results they want, they now have an opportunity from playing Spot the Difference that something can change. Now, you might need to give them some prompts and a few pointers for how they can make those changes, but being aware that we're talking about concepts in people's minds. If I'm talking to a client that's procrastinating about something that they don't want to tell me the topic, I can say to them, well, look, let's just represent it with an icon that you're happy to tell me the name of. It doesn't have to be directly related, but let's just give it an image, give it a label. And they might say, well, I don't know, a medieval knight's shield with a lion on it.
Yeah.
Great. So whatever that shield represents to you, when you step forward, what does it do? Well, it does this, righto. Well, now you've got something you can play with at a structural level. And as the client learns to make changes to how they represent that shield, and it's just like I sometimes describe it like a chessboard. Well, maybe it's been acting like a queen when really it's a rook. It can only go diagonally, or maybe it's supposed to. Is it a rook that goes diagonally? Yeah. What's the castle-y one? I don't know.
Yes,
whatever the castle is, that can only go in straight lines.
Straight lines, yeah. That's right, yeah.
Or maybe you need to represent it as a pawn that can only go forwards unless it's taking another piece, but there are no pieces that can only go forwards. Whatever makes sense to the client. But once they've got a pattern that they can make sense of and make use of, they have the ability to represent it differently inside their mind. Well, newsflash, every action and every decision that we ever take and we ever make is a concept in our mind. This may just seem like a mind game to many people. Well, my question would be, what games are you playing instead of this one? And are they working out for you very well or not? If they're working well, top stuff, keep doing that. If they're not, well, maybe it's time to learn another game or another way to play, because it's only in your imagination, which means it's very real for you. So that, procrastination is a big part of the work that I do with. It's usually my go-to is timelines for procrastination.
Yeah, very good.
Another thing that's very, very useful for, and you alluded to it earlier, is in goal setting or in planning. If things don't have a timeline, if they're not measured in time, then they generally too often they fall into very long-winded exercises with not much getting achieved. And again, yes, you can do planning you can use paper, you can use a calendar, you can use lots of different things. Well, you could also use your mind. And that way, the way you're representing your mind has a much higher likelihood of happening if you actually plan it the way you really want it. It's called getting what you want. I think it's a good plan.
No, that's great. Like procrastination. So, because a lot of people procrastinate a lot, don't they? Like, so that's really, really helpful. People, helpers, or anybody that is in this line of work to do that. Because the thing you mentioned last time was really good as well. Because I've used timelines to kind of, as I said earlier on, for helping people who have a bad memory and bringing them back to that time. And like they're looking at the TV screen, and it's really big, and you take the color out of it, and you throw away the remote control, and it smashes, and it just takes away that memory. So that was a really good part. But then what you did say the last time was really good, where they don't actually have to say what's wrong. They don't have to get personal. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Because I think that's great, isn't it? That's a great part of it.
Well, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and it's not just timelines that you can do this with. I mean, there's a lot of different areas of NLP and hypnosis that you can work content free. Is the simple way of labeling it.
Right,
look, for a lot of people, especially when you're working with people that are effectively working with a past memory. Something happened 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. In some cases, that was absolutely abhorrent and not of their own doing, no fault of their own in any way, shape, or form. Now, a lot of people straight off the bat, they do not want to share the details of what actually happened. Well, further from that, I don't really go down that track. I don't want to know what happened. I'm just not that voyeuristic. I don't want the details of my client's life. I'm just not that interested.
Yeah.
I've got my own life to look back on.
Yeah.
More importantly, laying on a couch and going over the same problem week after week after week. Well, it's been done for 100 years now. And, in analytical psychology, look, there are people that have had a benefit from it. However, it's not the only way. And I think that people need to know that you can represent, because look, it's not what happened back then, because it's not happening now. It's what's happening in your mind, in your body, in your thoughts, and in your how you represent those thoughts and how your physiology reacts to those thoughts that determines how you feel now. Now, if something happened 30 years ago and you're replaying it in your mind and feeling terrible every morning when you wake up, that is terrible. And that person's not to blame, okay? But they deserve the opportunity to learn that what's happening now isn't what happened then. It's what's happening now. Utilizing skills within NLP, with submodalities, using timelines, we can literally work with that, but we can just say, right, we can call it the event. Now, I never give it a name. I ask the client, what would you like to refer to this situation or this event as? So it's a word or phrase that makes sense to you, but I'm not here to put words in your mouth. You tell me what you think. And once the client simply, this is not about giving it a name to give it power or any of that sort of rubbish. It's simply giving it a label so that you can have a conversation about something, because we have to call things something. If we all had the same name, the world would be very confusing.
Yeah.
A chair and a table have different labels. It's no intrinsic meaning to it. Sorry, there is, but there's no deep and meaningful meaning to it. There is simply the ability to identify this event to that event, this table to that chair. And I do want the client to be very specific with this particular event, because if they're going to make changes to it, it's ecological to make sure they're making changes to that representation of that memory, not potentially clouding really positive memories. So we want to hone in on where are we making this change. We're using a sniper rifle here, not a shotgun. Now, once the event, whatever it might have been, once that has been represented in a different way, recoded, changed, whatever you want to call it, and that client is able to look back and be aware that something's happened, however, they're not having a visceral response to it now. Often I'll say to people, look, when you look back and think about this, how do you want to remember it? And a lot of people say, oh, no, I just want to forget it completely. And I do believe that's a moment for the devil's advocate to jump in. And I will ask them, I'll say, so you want to make sure that you never remember anything about it, including everything that you learned that's kept you safe the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want those bits. I'm like, right, so do you actually want complete amnesia and lose potential resources? And sometimes that is appropriate and it's possible. By far and large, what's a lot more useful is being able to look back on it. And like, for example, Mark, when you grew up, did you ever eat at a dining room table when you were a kid?
Yeah, all the time, yeah.
And how many legs did the chairs have?
4.
Yeah, yep. And you're thinking of one particular chair and one particular dining set?
Yeah.
And when you think about the left front leg of that chair, how does it make you feel?
Not just I remember the chair really. Just that really doesn't really matter that much.
Right. And now, exactly what I've just done with you, I'll often say, because a client might not know how they want to feel when they're representing something they never want to think about again. And I'll say, well, what would happen if I have a chat about that chair leg or something inane like that? And I'll say, well, what would happen if you were in 5 or 10 minutes time from now, if you were able to look back on that situation, know it occurred in your past, back where it belongs, and it's over, and the only visceral feeling you had would be similar to that of remembering the chair leg when you were 6 and ate your breakfast. Would that be more useful than what you've been doing every morning? Now, funnily enough, most people say yes. Now, that might not be the end point, but it's a bloody good starting point.
Yeah.
Rather than getting up and setting themselves up to have a horrible day every day, if they wake up every morning and go, what is it with this chair leg? Well, and shake their head and carry on, they then may choose something different, all right? And they may choose to have a different feeling. A very common feelings are, when I think of this time, I want to have like a no feeling to it. And I'm like, well, okay, well, it's impossible to have no feeling. So what's a no feeling there? Well, like being just numb to it. All right, so being numb, that's a feeling, right?
Yeah.
And then they might make some adjustments. But once we've found out what's right for them, we'll find a time in their life that they've had that feeling, so they know that's exactly the one they want. We'll anchor that and then go back and start making changes. And this is not a long, drawn-out process. This can be very, very quick. And at the end of the session, and I'm constantly testing as well, I will keep asking them about the situation. And at the point where they can look at me and go, look, for goodness sake, I get it, all right, just leave me alone. I'm okay. Righto, well, I'll be ringing you in 4 days to make sure you're still okay. And they're like, well, why wouldn't you be? I'm like, I've got every reason to know that you will be, and I'm going to damn well make sure that you are, because I like to test my work. And unfortunately, a lot of clients are surprised by that, because they've seen other people before for help and they've never been followed up on. And part of that's a bureaucratic failing of systems and finances. And another part of it, from the private therapy perspective, in my opinion, that's just laziness and stupidity.
Big time,
as whether you want to be a coach or a therapist, whatever you call yourself, if you're genuinely helping people, wouldn't it be nice to collect proof of that and let other people know about it? That's called a testimonial. People like reading those, especially when they're real.
Exactly.
If you're good at what you do and you ask your clients for testimonials, you don't have to write your own.
Exactly. And like I heard in the past as well, this, as you say, these things are so fast, the way you can do them. And they say, what if it doesn't work? So we can do it again. It only didn't take that long the first time. You know?
Yeah, look, it might be an extra 3 minutes out of your life. So be it.
Yeah.
Now, at the point of that change, and before the end of that session, something I like to work with all clients is to recognize that it's not just about what's happened in that session for that memory, because if something they've carried with them in some way, shape, or form for 30 years, if they have now learned how they can change the way they think about it, the way they feel, and how they literally what they can do. If they've learned how to do that, where else could they use this skill? What else could they clean up from the past? And then what happens if they just turn the skills on their head and start using them, instead of having things that are good, doubling them so they're great, and then double it again so they're fantastic, and double it again so they're wondrous, and double it again. I mean, how far do you want to go with it? How good do you want to? There are some activities I don't want. I'm quite happy with how good I feel about what I'm doing with them. There are other activities that, hell, it's always nice to feel better. A lot of people ask me, they say, well, you seem like you're always positive and always happy. I'm like, well, that's a lie for a start, because no human being can maintain one internal emotional state all of the time. I have bad days. Bad shit happens to good people all the time. It's what you can do next that counts. When the coronavirus first showed its ugly head, and the lockdown first started here in England, I had a training schedule ahead at that time. All of my live trainings were booked. I were booked, and most of them paid either deposits or paid in full. And the first thing I had to do at the beginning of lockdown was contact everybody, and ethically, it was the right thing to do for me. I offered them a refund. I did tell them that we were moving the dates, but they were offered a refund. Some of them took it because they didn't know financially where they'd be at. Others took the move of dates, and after the second move, I contacted people and said, I need to give you your money back. We just don't know when we can do this. There are other courses available online, but it is different. I felt that was the right thing to do, but be very clear. The evening that I did that, after I had rung everyone and refunded a fair amount of money, I went and got a beer and sat out in the back garden and went, well, this sucks. The world's crap. The pandemic's just been sent here to ruin my life. It's all over, blah, blah, blah. I was not a happy bunny. But by the time I'd opened my second beer, I went, you know what? Everyone's in the same boat. And right now I'm sitting here with a nice cold bottle of beer. It's I think it was about 7 o'clock in the evening. It's warm enough in England to be wearing a T-shirt. It's a lot of things to be happy about right now. And it's now time to put all of this into practice and go, well, how am I going to be flexible? What do I need to adapt? What do I need to adjust or change to be successful in this new market? And, further from that, there's going to be a lot of people potentially that are looking for some form of assistance. The very next day, I started doing Facebook Lives for both for here in the UK and then on a different channel for back in New Zealand. I thought, well, I don't know what all of the answers are for everywhere, but if you can shed a little light for a few people, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. Because we had to kind of do that. Then we had to just kind of, everybody had to kind of get with the change and the difference, so well done to you there, and thanks a lot for sharing that. So this has been great talking to you today about the timelines, Orlando. And probably the final thing I'll ask today about for the general public, for somebody who never heard about timelines before, could you kind of what way could that help them? Timelines help them?
Well, probably the easiest thing you could do is simply this. as an exercise for your mind, whether you do it with your eyes open or eyes closed, up to you. Some people find it easier with their eyes closed. Simply imagine a line. At one end is the future and the other end is the past. And notice for you, if that line goes front to back, side to side, or on an angle, where is spatially that line for you? Where would it be? You could notice, is the future the same color as the past? Note down what colors they are, just out of interest. When you look to the future and you look back on the past, are they the same length? Now, what I would suggest is, if it's not already doing so, stretch your timeline into the future much, much further. I would suggest moving your timeline just in your imagination. Just move it so that the future's in front of you and the past is behind you. And as the future goes out in front, have it start going out level, then have a slight gradient upwards, because your future should be looking up. As you look forward to the future and you see that timeline, if it's a little bit dull, just turn up the brightness, because you should have a bright future ahead of you. These are only small phrases in language, but they make a big difference to the way we think, because timelines are only in your imagination. It's just a concept. Like every other thought you have, every other resource from your past, every other piece of knowledge you have is just inside your mind. So if you're going to think about things, find useful ways to represent them on the inside. And having a timeline with a nice, long, healthy, bright future is a much smarter idea than the other option.
Yeah,
that would be my starting point advice. And there's a lot more to learn in there. The other side of it is timelines are great fun, because you get to play with language all the time.
Yeah, that's a brilliant takeaway, Orlando. Thanks a million for sharing that. That'd be really beneficial. Anybody who's listening, if they've never even heard of it before. So that's brilliant. Thanks a million for that.
Hey, very welcome, mate.
Yeah. So what we might do next time, Orlando, is talk about anchors. We could do an episode on anchors, if that suits you.
Yeah, I love boats.
Yeah, we can.
And we could do sails, and then we'll do masts.
Brilliant.
Absolutely, Mark. Look, it'd be absolutely my pleasure. Fantastic. Another fantastic tool in anchoring. NLP, anchoring. So, hey, Mark, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone out there, for listening. I hope you're enjoying what's coming across. And if you've got any requests on topics within the realm of NLP or hypnosis, or something that you feel is close to it that you'd like more information on, then in the show notes, get hold of Mark. And he's in the driving seat, so he will be asking the questions. So you're welcome to give him some extra ones.
Thanks, Orlando. So that was Orlando Zucchetto, everybody. So thanks a million today for coming on. And we're going to do this next Thursday on a show on anchoring, and probably a bit of boat talks as well.
Boat talks, but no Botox, mate. Yeah.
Very good.
I've earned every one of these lines. I'm not giving them up freely.
Okay, thanks a million. So thanks a million for tuning in to today's podcast, Mark's Motivational Podcast. Take care. Thank you.